All right. Welcome back to the Bees Like That podcast. As always, I'm your host, Chris. Man, that was rough. That technological difficulties. Yeah, I'll spare all you guys the dramatics. Suffice it to say, it was pretty stupid. So anyway, as y'all can see, if you're observant, and you have eyeballs, I got my wife back on the podcast. And I thought that if nothing else, we could bring her back on here and have her detail for us the program that she works in, heads up, runs. What is it? What's your title? Are you the boss lady? Are you the heifer?
No, no. I am, I don't know. I guess I'm the, I don't know. I don't know I don't want to offend anyone and take a title that I shouldn't.
What's your official title?
Just a social service worker with Family First Legal Advocates.
Okay, Family First Legal Advocates. That is a mouthful. So why don't you break it down for us and let us know what that's about?
Yeah, for sure. So, as you know, um, we work in the dependency world, welfare system. I always mess up that when I
It's a
say
hard one to say. I did
I know.
welfare. I do it all the time.
I know. So, recently, back in, well, the beginning of the year, a legislation was passed to issue funds for what's called a pre-filing program. And what that means is for people that are not yet court involved but are facing CPS investigations. And the program was specific to pregnant and brand new moms and dads in the hospital prior to discharge after baby's born. And it was something that Snohomish County's been doing for a while, and they've seen, a lot of success in meeting people upstream, they say, before it gets to the courts with advocacy, intervention, just wraparound services for parents to be able to keep babies in their care and take them home after birth, and avoid any sort of court involvement or a filing of a dependency petition.
So, quick question.
Mhm.
Um, does the baby have to be born before you can get involved? So is there like a like emptive strike, for lack of a better term? Are you able to get like wind of a potential investigation or the investigation and perhaps go meet with people before the baby is born? Is it strictly, what are the parameters, like after the baby's born and for a certain amount of time?
So I can work with pregnant moms.
Okay.
It's just harder to engage pregnant moms because I think from speaking with them, like they're kind of in this bubble where like reality hasn't hit.
Mhm.
Baby's still in belly. Um, they're still doing what they're doing. And so it doesn't really hit until they're holding that baby in their arms and they're like, shit, I don't want to lose this kid. And then so the parameters are, like, because technically CPS won't open an investigation on a pregnant person,
Mhm.
but they will receive calls and they will start a track record, so when that person gives birth, um, they're aware of that person because there's been intake calls, not always, but sometimes. And then the funding is specific for up to 2 weeks after birth, but I have stayed with moms longer than that, um, just to really see them through. I'll get more in detail, but see them through any safety plans that are implemented and, try to set them up for a longer term success. Um, but yeah, in a nutshell, that's what the program is. And it's not, so that's who we serve. That's not what the program is. So that's who we serve. The program is myself, social service worker, and then I have 4 attorneys that work alongside me, and we work with moms and we can work with dads that have a pending CPS investigation happening, or yeah, they usually all are happening by the time I'm involved. It's been started, the ball started rolling. Um, And our main goal is to just, like I said, provide support to the parents, and the attorneys are there so that they know their rights. And the investigation can be really scary and really invasive. That's the word. And a lot of the questions they don't need to answer necessarily, because it doesn't pertain to what's happening right now. And so the attorneys are really good at fishing that kind of stuff out and not letting, because CPS has a job to do. They have an investigation, they need to do their job, and they need to ask the questions and gather the information and stuff. And that the moms and dads shouldn't be doing the investigation for them. So does that make sense?
Yep. So no, I get it. I'm just because I don't know a lot of the details about the program, so I just want to know. I see you running around like crazy and working with a bunch of people, getting a bunch of calls, but we don't really dialogue too much about the details of the program. So this is good, and this is good information for everybody else too. So like in a perfect world, what does that I guess collaboration look like? So you show up at the hospital, I guess, then because the baby's still in the hospital with the parents, hasn't been discharged yet. And then what? Like if everything goes as planned, what does that look like? CPS is there, you said the attorneys are there, you're there, parents are there, and now what?
So in an ideal situation, um, so a lot of times, just to back up a little bit, these moms that are getting intake calls on them are typically done from the hospital social worker, and it's because baby has been born with substances in their system, and fentanyl is a huge one. So that's an automatic call, obviously. And then, or if a parent hasn't gotten prenatal care. Homelessness is not supposed to be an intake call anymore. Like it'll get fished out, like it won't go anywhere, but some of the hospital staff is still calling if a parent comes in and gives birth and is homeless. But that's not a safety concern, an imminent safety risk. So in a perfect world, we're all there. We identify what the safety risks are, which is typically baby was born on substances, mom used during pregnancy. Where do we go from here? And this is where it can get tricky and I get creative. If fentanyl's involved, the department requires, no matter what's called a 24/7 safety plan. What that means is that there is a safe and sober, stable person that either lets mom and baby live with them, or they go and stay with mom and baby. And baby is under 24/7 care of that.
Literally. Okay.
Yeah. So like baby has to sleep in that person's room. That person has to get up at all feedings. They don't have to do the feedings. Mom is encouraged to take care of all baby's needs, but that person has to have eyes on baby 24/7, which I know sounds ridiculous because obviously you got to sleep. And the department understands that, but the expectation is that mom and or dad or both are not allowed to be around baby alone at all.
Okay. So then that's problem solved, right? No.
For the short term. Yeah.
I guess the better question would be, do you see more times than not that once that's established that this person is the larger part of the safety plan, that creates enough stability and safety and removes enough concern that the baby can go home? Does that happen in all circumstances, or sometimes these safety plans and participants not accepted?
For the most part, it's accepted, but there's some key factors there, like since birth, let's say, mom has remained, away from use. Like she may have started methadone in the hospital, or maybe she was already taking methadone before birth, but the department, CPS wants to see that maintained, sobriety. But like I have had instances where mom has, we get the safety plan going, nothing's signed yet, but where mom will discharge and leave and go use. And then obviously that kind of throws that out the window because she's not really on board with, or she's just not ready yet. She's not ready to engage yet. And so oftentimes, usually from there, then a dependency petition will be filed. But more often than not, the moms and families are engaged and willing to participate in a safety plan. Because it all sounds good, but then a couple weeks into that, everyone starts getting burnt out.
That's a
Because
lot.
it's a lot. Yeah. And so then that's kind of where it gets a little bit tricky again, because if mom's doing really well and providing clean UAs, then, I'll go back to the department and ask if we can reevaluate the safety plan to lessen the restrictions of it.
Who's the
And
department?
it's just
For the people out there who aren't
Yeah.
familiar with our language, who's the department?
CPS. Sorry, I do that all the time. Yeah, or DCYF, CPS. I mean, there are appropriate. And I
Yeah.
think in investigations, it is Child Protective Services.
Okay. So anyway, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to clear that up.
No,
So
it's fine.
it goes back to the department and then the safety plan.
To try to lessen restrictions. Yeah. And then, because the hope is just a gradual step down, right? Where parents are able to parent without a babysitter. I mean, essentially, that's what that is.
Yeah.
And, they're caring for all basic needs and they're, stable in their sobriety and continuing to make changes. And, I mean, that's the hope. So
So
I've had quite a few successes. So this program started in February. I've helped over 40 moms now.
wow.
Yeah. And I don't know, I don't have accurate stats right now, but as of June, over half of those were successful safety plans.
Wow.
Yeah. And even the ones that weren't and were eventually filed on with the courts, they were so much more ahead of the game coming into court. Like they were already engaged with CPS. They were, talking to the social workers. They were, either involved in treatment or at least got an assessment done and knew next steps, what to do. It just seemed like, because sometimes when a dependency petition is filed, like, and I can speak personally, especially in our case, like we kind of went off the rails for, about a month.
Mm-hmm.
And that's common for parents when this traumatic event happens and your kids are taken from you.
Yeah.
And we were lucky because we bounced back fairly quickly, where a lot of these parents don't, and they're in the wind for a couple months. Luck, if that's on the low side, right? But with this program, we're seeing that with parents feel more supported, there's more advocacy going on, there's more connection to resources early. So the outcomes, obviously we're still new, so we don't have any close successful dependencies yet from the program, but it looks good. It's looking good.
So the 2 weeks, that's a really quick turnaround for like establishing a safety plan, getting everybody on board, getting it signed off, and then stepping down, like you say, so the parents are parenting, quote unquote, without a babysitter. I would have to imagine, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I would have to imagine that there are cases that present as being a bit more complicated and difficult. So how do you prepare people? What's the conversation like going into it, like with an understanding that there's a likelihood, pretty high likelihood, that even with the safety plan, that this is going to continue, like they're going to file a petition. What is it exactly that you walk parents through? What's that conversation like?
I mean, if we can get the safety plan signed, then most likely a petition will not be filed.
Mhm.
provided the parents still are engaging. But at that point, everyone is like, it's a really good feeling, they get to take their baby home. Everyone's, like they're on this high of life. And I mean, I guess I'm very straightforward with my parents, and I let them know what the expectations of CPS are for them. And if I see anything that's problematic, I call it out right away to them. I'm like, check it out. You got to work this behavior. That's not going to work. That's not going to fly. That's going to be a problem for you. But I think the idea of the program is to provide that initial advocacy and legal representation in the investigation. And I have to have the safety plan signed and done quickly, because I only have a limited time frame. Because if we don't have anything figured out before baby's ready for discharge, then they're going to file that petition. Mm-hmm. So I only have maybe anywhere from 3 days to depending on baby status. If baby was born and they're going through significant withdrawals and they're in the NICU, that is you don't know when a baby's going to be ready for discharge. So that gives me some more time. But for these babies that are born, like I just had one that was born on a Monday and was medically cleared to go within 7 days. And so I had that short amount of time to get everything finalized.
Wow. So I guess then, what do you see would be because you didn't say 100% of the time, you said that most of the time they won't file a dependency. So what is it then what's the clincher? What is the linchpin there that even with the safety plan in place, that the dependency is filed? Is it that there's still a lot to work out on the parent side? Maybe there's still a little bit more to work on before we get closer to, I don't know, a healthier spot with like engagement, stuff like that? Are there barriers between professionals? Like what, I guess I'm just trying to get down to like the brass tacks of what it's going to look like for a parent who is doing all the right stuff, but still the dependency gets signed. Because you did touch like a bit on like everything's feeling great and everybody's got these high spirits and the baby gets to come home and stuff like that. Is it maybe there's a crash in the energy right around the 2-week mark and everybody's starting to feel burnout, like you say, and just kind of realizing that this is the real world, like this is the reality, like this motivation that we found. I hate to call it a win, but over the success with the safety plan and the baby staying with the family and everybody's intact, and then the reality sets in like, oh snap, I still have all of these things that I have to like remedy that have gone unmitigated for a while. Maybe they're unsheltered, or it's unemployment, or like there's other family issues or whatever. Maybe the baby is medically fragile and has a lot of high level of need and like it needs a high level of care. Like I know that's a lot, but like what is that linchpin?
I don't think it's like as easy as, a black and white issue. I think there's so many different variables in there. And, honestly, if a parent if they're providing clean UAs and they're following the safety plan, then they're not going to file a petition. That just won't happen, but if there's any sort of, and I mean, we know like working with these parents and working with addicts in general, like sobriety is hard and some people just aren't there yet. And even though like I've had different cases where everything looks really great, everyone's doing what they're supposed to be doing, but then you get these UA results back and they're positive for fentanyl. Mm-hmm. And so obviously that's a huge issue. Yeah. And the department at that time will reassess everything. CPS will reassess everything, which makes sense, and then if it continues to be a problem, like I would say one UA is obviously alarm bells are going off, but if the next one is clean and they continue to provide clean, then they can probably recover from that. But if there's like 2 in a row, or a positive and then a negative and then a positive, like they're going to end up in court. That's just going to happen because no one is playing around with fentanyl. It's it's dangerous. And I mean, I hate it when the department says it. It's true, but and when they're like, babies are dying, I mean, that's a harsh reality. It's true.
Right.
And we all know how serious it is. So yeah, there's not a whole lot of leeway when it comes to that at all. Or if they're not following the safety plan, if they, I guess the main thing would be parents just taking off and leaving the baby with a safety plan participant, and they're just gone for like a day or 2 or 3, and then they come back and it's like, well, where have you been? What's been going on?
Yeah.
That's another issue. I think technically my role is supposed to just be, I come in, I help them, I get the safety plan, baby gets to go home, and then I'm done with my job. But that's really hard for me. Like a lot of times in these situations, I'm the only, me and the attorneys obviously, but I'm usually the first face that they see. Like I'm the only friendly face like that's on their side and advocating for them. And I've been there and I'm in recovery and they see me as a safe space. And so it's hard for me to let them go, just be like, oh, sorry, I don't have the space for this right now. My contract says
14 days. Sorry.
Yeah. So I may need to get better at that in the future, but right now I'm allowed that because I'm not so busy, that I can't be there for these people.
Dude, I see a real benefit of you being right there in the room. Well, you, the attorney, and stuff like that, because that's got to be a really tumultuous time for these parents, moms especially, just having a baby, no matter the delivery method, but and whatever else might be on board, whether they're, were actively using up until the time they went to the hospital, or if they've been sober for a while, if they're on MAT, if like that's part of the conversation. Like that's got to be really tricky for them to try to navigate on their own with like their head's got to be swimming. Like where do you come in with like regard to, are you kind of like this, like the watchdog, like sitting there like, nah, you don't need to talk about that kind of, how does that go? Like,
I mean, I try to be, the investigators
watchdog was a
upset.
bad term, but like, there's kind of like a buffer between.
No, for sure. I mean, yeah, I definitely try to come in and just, because they're asking a lot of questions, and I know that that's their job. I'm not saying that they shouldn't or they can't or whatever, like that's their job and I get that. But there's just some things that I feel, and with the attorneys feel too, that don't need to be answered, that just, especially after just giving birth, the women's hormones are all over the place. Depending on if they had a C-section or not, they're on pain medication. So like they're a little loopy anyway, going through withdrawals themselves. Like there's all these factors, and it's like, and throw in like 1, 2, 3 investigators coming in your room and asking you all these crazy questions about, your use history, just stuff that like on a good day, you're like, what? And so I just try to, I know what questions our attorneys don't want our parents to answer. And so if an attorney can't be there, then I'm like, you don't need to answer that. and CPS doesn't appreciate that when I do that. But too bad.
Overall, do you feel like it's relatively successful, or what's the word I'm looking for? So when you show up, the investigators show up, when or if, not when or if, but maybe the attorneys aren't there yet, but then they show up, or they're already. How do you feel like that professional dynamic goes? Like, are there courtesies that you extend to the investigators and courtesies that they extend to you, only in an effort to try to make this as seamless and effective as possible? Because there's got to be an element of teamwork here, or else this is just going to be a nightmare. I can imagine you'd be hashing out these safety plan details for hours.
Yeah. I mean, I've come really far quickly with like the expectations of the investigators and what they want to see in a safety plan. So ideally, the social worker from the hospital will call me and say, look, I got this mom, just gave birth. I need to make a call to CPS, a referral. Can you come meet with mom? And I'm like, yeah, that's when that happens, that's beautiful because then I can get in there, meet with mom, talk to her before CPS even shows up. And that's just because then I can get to know her. I can ask some questions. If baby's born positive for fentanyl, I'd be like, this is what they're going to want from you. Who do you got? Who do you got? Who can be a safety plan participant? So that we can already get those things going. They can talk to family members. We can get that started. And I feel like on my end, that's super collaborative with, trying to work with them because I know what they're going to want. And so I'm trying to help them, in the long run and the mom as well, obviously. I do think that there are certain social workers with CPS that I work better with. And I think it's just because I've worked with them more. And we have a good, relationship. We'll text, hey, I'm going to the hospital now. Can you meet me there? And like offer those courtesies, which is fantastic. And then there's others that I don't know if they don't want me there or just don't care, or I don't know. So it's a struggle. It goes back and forth, but I feel like I want to be collaborative with CPS because I think that's going to be the best outcome for the parents.
So you've talked about what a safety plan is, and you've said a couple of times that you're pretty well versed on the expectations of the investigators. I don't know that we've talked about that in detail. So what does that look like? What expectations are you talking about?
So just that with the 24/7, like what that looks like, how the participant, I'm very clear that the participant is the one that has to have eyes on baby, the 24/7, that they got to be up for feedings, that they have to be present for all appointments, that, baby doesn't go anywhere unless that safety plan participant is there. And that is basically, these safety plans, even though they're really intrusive and there's a lot to ask of a safety plan participant with that 24-hour, 7-day-a-week schedule, it's pretty cut and dry what's expected. And so that doesn't really change at all. That's the main thing. And then the other piece of the safety plan would be if parents are involved, which they usually are, or will be starting MAT at BCTC, which is Bellingham Comprehensive Treatment Center. It's our MAT clinic in Whatcom County. Then they continue to do that, and they continue to go to their appointments, get an assessment, and follow whatever recommendations there are. The sad part is that there's absolutely 0 treatment beds available. Like it's a 6-month wait list. For PPW
babies.
Yeah, for pregnant parenting women. Yeah. And then there's 2 family treatment centers in Washington State. One is in Spokane that is only for Spokane residents. And they just opened one in Seattle. Evergreen opened a family treatment center, but that's a 6-month wait as well. And they actually they closed their wait list. So who knows how long that is. So the department would love to see everyone have to go to inpatient, which I'm not saying that they shouldn't, but that's just not a reality.
Yeah. With the MAT stuff, so this is, and I don't want to derail the conversation and get too far off in the MAT world because we could talk about that and the pros and cons of that and whatever. Just the one, I guess, if you could provide a hot take or if you don't feel comfortable, an opinion on. Because I honestly, like, I have an issue with like seeing fentanyl obviously is dangerous. Methadone, in my mind, okay, well, we're not seeing methadone being illegal forms of methadone being smuggled into the country in large amounts. And I guess compared to fentanyl, we don't see people dying of methadone overdoses at the rate that we do with fentanyl and other drugs, like with the advent of what are the other ones? Trank and what is it, xylazine or whatever, but well, I guess it's just a personal hang up for me because methadone's an opiate and it used to be administered for pain medication. It was pain management. Um, and it likely still is, but it had a broader use spectrum and coupled with the broader conversation spectrum as well. Like, and just the conversation around methadone has changed too. Like back in 2008, it was not the wonder drug that it's posited to be today, but now it is. It's like considered a gateway into recovery for a lot of people. But I understand too that you can still continue to use fentanyl well on methadone, and some MAT clinics actually encourage people to continue to use fentanyl while they're titrating up to their therapeutic dose. I'd imagine that wouldn't be the case with breastfeeding moms.
No, no. And the hospital actually, if mom tests positive at birth, then I haven't seen a mom that's been allowed to breastfeed yet.
Okay. So I guess
No,
that's what you're thinking too.
Not in Whatcom County anyway.
So it seems like there's a spectrum of exposure too for the baby. So let's say that mom tested positive at 6 months, but then didn't at 8 months, and then didn't at birth. Is there still same level of care and reporting? Like, is she still going to be reported? Like the likelihood of CPS is going to still be involved? And what does that look like?
It's the same thing.
Same
It's the
thing.
same thing. It's frustrating because I mean, I guess I shouldn't say the same thing because I did have a mom recently who that exact situation. But she was living in clean and sober housing, and so they allowed her to. Then the investigation was opened, but they allowed mom to discharge with baby to the clean and sober place, and now she's in family voluntary services, which is another extension of CPS that is not court involved. The investigation is over, but she still is involved in family voluntary services for God, I don't know. It can be 3 months, 6 months.
So that's indeterminate.
Yeah. I really feel like it's everything's so ambiguous and arbitrary, and it's really frustrating for these moms. And I mean, it's frustrating for me too, because I'm like, could we just get why isn't there an outline of this program,
How often does that happen where the baby's released to their care? Let's assume that there's a safety plan in place. Like, for instance, in this case, where mom didn't test positive, like she'd been I presume clean for months and then clean at birth.
Yeah.
He goes to the clean and sober house with her. But then this investigate or like the prevention services is put in place. How often does that happen?
Not a lot, because most of the moms that I work with recently anyway, since the program has started, have been using up until birth. Mm-hmm. So that's rare. I'm hoping it'll become more common, because I mean, that's great. As soon as she found out she was pregnant, she stopped using, which is ideal, right? And so she didn't have to have a 24/7 safety plan. She was able to just discharge, under I guess it would be a safety plan, but it wasn't a 24/7 safety plan. It was just continue with your treatment. She was in IOP, continue within your clean and sober house. And they put her on a color line, a UA color line.
Okay, so parents who say mom uses up to childbirth, mm-hmm. and then she's clean after that, and she gets directed to prevention services, and UA, so sorry, not yet, but then UA is clean for 2 weeks, safety plan is completely and fully adhered to, and then boom, she's in prevention services after this clean 2 weeks. Is that something that you see that a lot? Is that like a no? Okay.
It should be like that. I feel like it should be a step down at least. Mm-hmm. They don't like to do safety plans longer than a month, because they feel like if something has to be integrated for longer than a month, it's not working.
So the safety plan could be a month, but you're technically 2 weeks.
Yes. Yeah.
I got confused about that part.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
No, and so I lost my train of thought.
They don't like to do safety plans longer than 30 days.
Longer than a month, yeah, because and it makes sense, if they have to keep going longer than a month, then the safety plan isn't working. Like if there's a reason, if there's alarm bells that they need this to continue, then they need to reevaluate and something's not working. And so then at that time, they may decide to file.
Hmm.
I've had so many like different, no case is the same. Like I have examples of all these different things, but like I've never had, everything is a little different, because that's humans, no, there's no two alike.
Yeah. So something anyway, if there was a place to elevate awareness about the program itself, I mean, it's relatively new, so I imagine there's probably you've probably done a great job of creating a fair degree of awareness, but if there were between professionals and agencies, and I don't mean just like DCYF, but the hospital and like other providers like MAT clinics and stuff like that, what would it be that any advice that you could give to other professionals about the program or any barriers that you would like to see kind of like knocked down?
I mean, I have been a part of many, many summits and different gatherings and meetings with all sorts of providers. It's just trying to figure out that still, really. I mean, I guess probably I need to hit doctor's offices more.
Mhm.
Just that, go into like OBGYNs and be like, hey, we have this program. If you have a patient that's struggling, but then oftentimes too, those patients aren't getting the prenatal care. But some of them are. And so, I think that would be good place for me to go.
You could come in even earlier, right? Like
Yeah.
you could come in if like the OB hit you up and was like, hey, I got this mom that I'm a little worried about.
Yeah. I mean, technically, because of HIPAA and everything, and this is the frustrating part, is like there's
Maybe you
no
back.
referral system. Like they have to give the information to the parent and the parent has to make the call.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that's where a lot of disconnect happens. And then
How'd that
working
happen?
what
Have you had that happen?
them a parent,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. When I working with Olympic Opportunity Council's hot team,
yeah.
I've gotten a few moms reach out to me because they got my information from the hot team.
Yeah. Hmm. So as far as like DCYF is concerned, the prevention services are in place. That can be anywhere from, you say how long could that last? The family prevention services?
Um, Anywhere from, I mean, I don't know. I've seen some cases close in 3 months, 6 months. I don't think it should go a year. I think that's way too long.
Yeah.
Um, but
So then if it like they just reach a point in time where they're like, okay, everything's good, but they have all the same meetings with the parents and providers on board, like are attorneys still involved while parents are in prevention services?
no,
No. So they're just
they're not.
so if you're not there and attorneys aren't there, they're just navigating this space on their own with DCYF.
Yeah.
What do we do? What do you do about that? How do you feel about that?
I mean, ideally, if they're in these services, then they're stable enough to be able, hopefully, to navigate that.
Mhm.
Like they're at a place in their sobriety or in life where it's, because FVS, Family Voluntary Services, it's not as intrusive as a normal case. Like they might talk to them. If it's once a week, that's a lot.
Hmm.
Um, to
No.
check in to make sure that is, am I glitching?
Yeah, a little bit, but it's okay.
Okay. Just to check in with them and make sure that they're still like in services like IOP, or, and their UAs are coming back. But it would be lovely to have, someone be able to walk them through that as well.
I guess that makes sense though, if they have, if it's just kind of like a lighter touch engagement with the department, and they're not given free rein, but they're allowed to exercise some agency and just
Mhm.
like, navigate their lives, because ultimately they're the experts on their lives when it comes down to it, and really the trajectory of it is going to depend on their choices day to day. And one other question too, but we'd have to travel back in time a little bit to like the safety plan stuff. It seems like this is something that I see too, with different cases that I've worked on or that I observe while I'm just waiting in court for a case to come up with these safety plans. It's like, I don't know, maybe I have a simplistic view of this, but on both sides, like it seems like the department has, I don't know, maybe a lack of awareness or doesn't want to understand that it can be difficult for people coming out of the malady to generalize principles for everyday life as they relate to like being CPS involved, whether or not they're in a dependency or not. Like just saying like, okay, maybe it isn't a good idea that I'm in a car with my kid with an unlicensed driver who doesn't have insurance, who has warrants, right? Or who's actively using drugs. Like this is something like I haven't seen that scenario specifically, but I'm sure that it exists, right?
Mhm.
Or like maybe it's a bad idea to have, my boyfriend come over who I know is an active user. I'm not using, but somehow like I pop dirty for low levels of fentanyl. And whether or not you're using, it doesn't really matter in the eyes of the court a lot of the time, because the presence is still there. So
Mhm.
where is that? This may not be an easy question to answer, but is that a phenomenon that you experience too? Like people kind of have a difficult time like generalizing these like what seem to be like day one fundamentals on like, okay, I gotta operate. This is how I gotta move until CPS is out of my life. So I'm gonna probably not do some of the things that I want to do. Like it's not cool to do just because that's not explicitly listed in the safety plan. I still probably shouldn't do it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like, come on, like you gotta, I know some of these parents, and I've said, I'm like, you have to act like there's someone watching you 24/7 and what you're doing and the decisions that you're making. Like, I mean, you would think that'd be a given, but it's not for all these parents. And it's frustrating because I'll hear something and I'm like, what?
Right.
What were they thinking? Like, are you serious?
Yeah.
Um, I guess because too, we've been through it, right? And so it's like, why are you guys not using your brain? Like, come on.
But it can feel that way, but it just like, and this isn't something that just occurred to either one of us right now for sure, but like, man, when people say shit like meeting people where they're at, blah, 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 I think that term gets overused a lot, and like the application isn't as universal as a lot of people think it is, because like you can't meet me where I'm at because you're white and you're a woman, right? So that like there's a lot of places where you can't meet me. And the same goes for other professionals with regard to parents. Like a lot of people, a lot of the professionals or legal parties involved, they're adjacent to a lot of the experiences that us or other parents involved in the child welfare system are impacted by, um, go through and are continuing to go through. So they can't really meet people where they're at. So I guess to connect that with the point that I made in kind of tongue in cheek, we get a good giggle out of it, but I guess the point is getting everyone on the same page, myself included, when I'm dealing with people and other professionals who don't share lived experience. Um, just the mildness in the approach when teaching people who aren't favorably disposed. So, like you say, they may not be ready, and it may be because of a resistance to an idea. It may be because of differing opinions or cultural differences or socioeconomic status or racism or like other implicit bias, it doesn't matter, but I think the milder approach to teaching, specifically being like using like guiding questions to lead people into conclusions that they feel like they've made on their own, like parents or other professionals. Um, and this is something that I work on. And low key, sometimes I do this to people because if I don't like them, but overall and in general, it's not something that I try to do on purpose, but making people feel like you're infantilizing them or talking down to them or patronizing them while trying to deliver a message. And I think that can be easy for a lot of people to do who feel impassioned about a topic,
Mhm.
especially if you feel right and because you're so personally connected to a thing or things related to child welfare, dependency law, um, DCYF policy, et cetera, whatever. Um, but anyway, yeah, and to just close it up and put a nice little bow on it, what would it be for anyone, professional, parent alike, one or as many takeaways as you want about the program, life during dependency and afterward, if you could give them like one tidbit on the spot, deliver, you better deliver. One little tidbit or takeaway that you could give parents and professionals alike about how to, um, I don't know, stay at the table once we get there.
That's hard because it,
Yeah, you knew it was coming,
I
player.
know, I know. I mean, for me in this position, just being really simplistic is it's easy because there's a brand new baby. There's a brand new life. And like that power that that holds
Sure.
is like, that's that's all that I need to say. You know what I mean? Because, and we have plenty of kids that it's like that, just that new life, that new baby, and it can make a person move mountains. And so I'm lucky in that way that I don't have to, that's all the motivation, right there. And so that makes my job a lot easier in a way. And especially because they're in the hospital, like their child hasn't been removed yet. They've got everything to fight for still, everything. And so that's huge.
How do people find you in this program? How do they get a hold of it? How do they get engaged? They
Um,
need it. They need help. What do they do?
well, um, you can find us on our website. It's familyfirstlegaladvocates.com. Um, my flyers are all over the place, and my by my phone number, it's 360-815-2241, to reach out and connect with me. um I'm still working on getting everyone to know this program, but I think a lot of providers, a lot of the social service providers in our community know about me because I
Good.
have been in everyone's face. So
Yeah, you gotta be like that. So
yeah,
just to clear one thing up, this
yeah.
is something I wanted to ask earlier. So your service is you, like you are the program. You come in, you advocate, you help develop safety plans. You essentially like you're the umpire, right? Like you're the symphony coordinator in a way, kind of, going to bat for the parents and doing all this other fantastic stuff. With To answer a question right now, unequivocally, to other providers, you do not provide other services for parents, right? Like you're not an SUD service provider, you're not a mental health evaluation or service provider, et cetera, right? Am I close to being correct about that?
You're absolutely correct. No. I am not a referral for those things. I will help parents make calls.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, I am, that's not what I do. And also our program is free legal representation for people facing the CPS involvement. It's not just free legal help for anything. We can't help you with your will. We can't
Okay.
help you with a protection order.
No probate stuff. Like if
Yeah.
I got probation, you can't come sit in.
No, unfortunately, no. We just work with the child welfare
No
system.
letters of recommendation or any of that stuff, huh?
Yeah, no, no.
That
Because
sucks.
that's been a community miscommunication as well.
Yeah. But to that free legal representation within the welfare system, so it's you're available day 0 to 14 officially.
Yeah.
The attorney who comes or is on board, them or another of the four, if this does progress into a dependency, will they be on board for the duration of that? Or
Yes, they will follow the parent through the life of it.
perfect, perfect.
Mhm.
Awesome. And then they may or may not come to work with somebody like me.
Exactly. It's
You
where
know,
I pass the ball.
dime skills. All right. Well, I don't have any other questions, and I want to say thanks again for coming on and explaining the program to the 53 viewers out there in the YouTube streets who pay attention to the shit that I got going on over here. Anything else you want to tell the people out there?
No, just, spread the word. And thanks for having me on here. I appreciate it.
Of course. All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.